It's an enormous pleasure to have Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson joining us in the Brilliant Minds bunker today. Tanni is one of Britain's most iconic Paralympic athletes, competing in 5 Paralympic Games, winning 11 gold medals and breaking 30 track world records. Tanni is also chair of UK Active, a non-exec director at the BBC. She also sits on the board of Transport for London and is a trustee of the Duke of Edinburgh Award, to name just but a few things. Tanni was appointed to the House of Lords in 2010 as a crossbench peer. Tanni, welcome to the bunker.
Thank you.
Now, this year's marathon was supposed to take place last weekend. Lots of people who are listening to this might have in fact been wanting to race in that marathon. You have won the London Wheelchair Marathon an incredible 6 times. Can you share some of your favourite and perhaps some of your least favourite memories from that competition?
I think one of my favourites was the first time I did it, just being, quite a young athlete, excited, that number of people watching, a huge field of athletes, and it just felt amazing. And the trouble with the marathon, for me anyway, if I'd know about a mile and a half in if I was going to have a good one or a bad one. And a mile and a half in, if you're going to have a bad one, it's pretty miserable the next 24 and a half miles, 25 miles. So the best bits, the finish, you take that sort of final turn, which is now in front of Buckingham Palace. It used to be on Westminster Bridge, and you think you're nearly there, and then you actually see how far that 365 yards is. But I think for me, it's the crowds. The crowds are amazing, and as a British athlete, you get support the whole way. And although it's quite irritating for some of the international athletes, for the British guys, it was always a huge boost.
Fantastic. And I mean, obviously this year it's been postponed, and that so much money is raised for charities at the event. What do you think the impact's going to be for those charities having that revenue, sort of taken away from them?
It's a big impact because it raises millions every year. And the reality is an awful lot of people just run the London Marathon once to raise money, mostly for a good cause. And, they're not training full time. They have quite a regimented, maybe a 16 or a 20-week plan leading up to it. And then that's it for their marathon running. So, I think everyone understands why it had to be postponed, but extending training could be difficult for some. What was amazing on Sunday, I went out, I was part of with a group of guys from UK Active. We were doing marathon. A few guys were doing marathons in their back garden. I was part of a team of 3 where we did a marathon between us. But I saw one runner along our road, and he shouted at me as he went past, "This is my first London Marathon. I'm meant to be doing the finishes along there." And we sort of went, "Yay!" It's not quite the 10,000 people who get to the finish line, but
oh, wow.
it's amazing actually how many people I saw who would have been running London who were out raising money for charity. It was really lovely.
Fantastic. And of course, the Olympics and the Paralympics has been postponed, obviously. And in fact, we're hearing at the moment that, unless a vaccine is found, that perhaps even moving the date till next year might not actually happen. What kind of impact, what kind of challenges do athletes face with having a moving date like that? I mean, what goes through their minds? How do they prepare?
I think most athletes knew it was coming, but the questions they now need to know is, what will the qualification period now be? There are some sports who are saying that the athletes that would have gone to Tokyo this year should still go next year. But the reality is there's some older athletes who are just hanging on. There's some younger athletes who wouldn't have made the team this year because they were too young, too new. I say new in the sport, they could have been competing for 10 plus years, but they'd make it next year. So the fairness of the qualification is really important. And athletes, by nature want to compete, and they're not used to having such a long period without competition. And so the ones that will come out of this really strongly are the ones who will have seen it come in and adapted and got the right equipment at home to be able to train, and the ones who can drop back into their winter training and kind of extend that winter period. But for some athletes, this is a huge opportunity for them to have such a huge block of training time without having to peak for competitions. But they need to keep that really positive mindset in terms of the opportunity and maybe some of the challenges that it presents.
And you work across a few different sports, don't you? Have you worked with particular athletes who are preparing for the Paralympics or for the Olympics?
Yeah, my husband coaches. I sort of help out. I don't coach anymore because of my parliamentarian work. But I think for the athletes we work with, we were kind of tracking what was happening around the world. Our athletes made sure they had, because they train in gyms and other places, they made sure they had all the equipment that they needed at home. They're getting on with things. And it's been interesting, trying to adapt training plans. My husband works for triathlon, so, swimming's quite hard. There's not many people who have their own pools to be able to do that with. And actually what's kind of, we dug out a piece of equipment that I reckon is about 25 years old. It's called Swim Bench. And some of the younger athletes had never seen one of these before. And I used to use it in training. And actually it's pretty good, so there's stuff you can do if you're adaptable. But you just have to have a different mindset. You have to have a very open mindset about this. You can't close your mind down to different options. So I think the guys that Ian work with, they're doing pretty well. And now due to technology, we can watch training sessions. We can be there. We catch up. We sit and have a coffee together sometimes through online, and you can make things work. Although it can be quite exhausting. I think being online all the time is quite exhausting.
Now, talking about that, last week was the first online debate in the House of Lords. Can you tell me about that? That's a historical moment.
It was amazing. I never thought the House of Lords would go online, and we had the first fully online debate ahead of the Commons. So, it's not competition, but it's competition. And it was quite hard because it was a 3-minute debate. So each person could speak for 3 minutes, and it's really tightly timed. If you go over 3 minutes, you take time from other people. And we have a clock in the chamber, but we're all having to do our own timekeeping and, I'll mute ourselves. And I hit 2:59. So, I was very pleased with that. The competitor in me, you want to hit, I kind of want to hit that time. It worked really, quite well. We're all developing, I think at the moment it's name what online platform I don't have, and it's remembering which one's for which meeting. But it shows actually, and it's the biggest change in Parliament that there's been in hundreds of years, and it shows we can change culture and we can change the way we work. I think the bit that's really important, that this is true for everyone, it's out of this, what's the good stuff that's happened, and what's the behaviour and the culture that we don't want to go back to. And I think that's, and while we're all, there's a lot of pressure with furloughing and jobs and, the redundancies, there's a lot going on. Trying to find the headspace to take the good stuff is really important, because I hesitate to call it the pandemic an opportunity, but there are some opportunities to do things differently. And we don't actually have to sit around the table together all the time. People don't have to travel in the same way that they have been. There are ways of making this work.
And you just mentioned there that you had 3 minutes, and obviously the athlete in you is saying, well, I've been given 3 minutes, therefore I will make sure it's no longer than 3 minutes. How do you actually prepare for something like that? So, in terms of your preparation for something like that online?
Well, in terms of the speech preparation, we don't have speechwriters. I think people assume that we have this big office, and people sort of write to me and say, get a member of your staff to reply to me. And it's like, it's me. I have someone who looks after my diary, but everything else is me. I answer the emails, I write the speeches. I think per minute of speech that I write, it can take between 8 to 10 hours of prep and rewriting and, checking in what other people may be saying. So it can be a huge, and actually it's very true, similar to sport. You spend this massive amount of time training. We trained 10, 12 times a week, 50 weeks of the year, but my Paralympic career is 19 and a half minutes over 5 games. It's a bit like that. You spend this huge amount of time doing the grunt work for this little bit at the end. And then ultimately it's just about a word count, and I can talk very quickly. It doesn't always make it very understandable for the people in the chamber. But if I need to get the words in, I can. It's I use the BBC word count, which is 2.5 words a second. And that's sort of what it comes down to is words. Actually, it's harder to write a shorter speech than a longer one. The toughest speech I ever had to write had to be 59 seconds. And that was pretty tough to do. And I get a lot of feedback actually from friends, colleagues, other people. Social media often provides feedback, and it's always useful to take that from the point of view of a critical friend, mostly, unless they're just rude about my hair or what I'm wearing. But sometimes actually they're right. It's you try and do better next time, because we always have another, in politics, we always have another chance to do it, but you have to spot those moments and you have to make it count, And for me, in 3 minutes, I asked 9 questions, which I thought was quite good, actually.
Remarkable, remarkable.
Yeah.
I suppose you have the, the pressure of representing people's points of view, and people who have contacted you, and you care about what you're talking about, so you want to do a good job. So all those things are at play. I know you've also talked in the past about the importance of relationships and the importance of building good relationships when it comes to getting work done. Can you share any examples of how you do that actually in the House of Lords?
Well, coming from the sport background, you have a training group, you have coaches, you have dietitians, physios, all these different people that you use at different times, whose job is to make you be as good as you can be. And I find sort of politics fairly similar. I'm not an expert in absolutely everything I go into. I'd say I have a high amount. You can't go into a debate where you don't know what you're talking about, because you get found out. But I'm not an expert in every single part of it. So for me, it's about having people who can offer help, advice, send me links. I've got a group of friends, colleagues on the outside world who help me with a bit of editing, or I send them something, say, does this make sense? Because if they don't understand it, and the minister doesn't understand it, and what you want is a decent answer from the minister. So that kind of sense check is important. I think it's also important that you don't just go to those people when you want something, because these are all unpaid people. They're volunteers. They're doing it to help. It's about having, a good relationship with them at all times. And when I worked on the Welfare Reform Bill, which was a massive piece of legislation, the disability rights community were incredible. They had 3 people online for every single minute of the debate, watching, listening, because sometimes if you're in a debate for 7 or 8 hours, it's hard to listen to everything and take it on board. And they'd send me notes and points, and that really helped. And actually, if you don't have a good day, sometimes, you come out and it's pretty soul destroying. And again, in welfare, I had one debate where I was in charge of all the votes that day, and every vote takes 20 minutes. And if you lose a vote, you lose 25 minutes, and then the next vote gets pushed back. So you're not just weighing up whether you want to vote, it's whether it's the right thing to vote, and trying to pick the priority for that day. And I think I'd lost 3 of the votes, and I came out, and we have a break for evening meal, dinner break. And I rang home, and my daughter, who was about 7 at the time, said, Daddy's made me watch the Parliament channel. I went, oh, good, what did you think? And she's like, you're not having a very good day, are you? You're losing. Yeah, I am. And she said, do you think anyone's actually listening to what you're saying? Like, no, probably not. But that, it's sweet because she's like a little, little girl. But sometimes that reality, and the politics is, what we do affects everyone's lives, good or bad. People like you or hate you. There's not much in the middle. Mm-hmm. And you try not to make people's lives worse. We really do. But that sense of normality is really important to refocus and put it back into perspective.
Wow, gosh. Indulge me for a moment here, Tanni, if you don't mind. You won BBC Sports Personality Lifetime Achievement Award just at Christmas time, actually. When you go to an event like that, and congratulations, unbelievable. I mean, you're amongst amazing people. Dame Jessica Ennis-Hill, we've got, David Beckham in there, so Alex Ferguson, I think, won it. I'm just picking out from my memory now. I'm sure there's other amazing people there. When you go to an event like that, who do you hope you're going to bump into? Do you, like the people outside of sports, sit there going, oh my goodness, if only I could bump in? Do you do that?
Yeah, you do, because I've got some amazing friends in sport who are very well known, and then I've got people that I look at their sporting achievements and go, oh wow, So I hope I never lose that. I really hope that I never lose that kind of excitement around being sports. And ultimately, they're sports people. I absolutely adore Jurgen Klopp. I am not a football fan, apologies, but he said, football is the most important thing of least important things. And he said it particularly around the pandemic, which is quite important for that context. But yeah, no, I do. I remember the first time I met Dave, well, you name it, David Beckham. My personal hero is Gareth Edwards, Welsh rugby player. And the first time I met him, I was 23. I was at Welsh Sports Personality. I just won the trophy. And he came up to me and he said, hello, Tanni. My name's Gareth Edwards. I used to play rugby. And I would just go, and I said something really stupid. And I was like, the point you're thinking, I just want the floor to swallow me up. This is just, and I tried to have a conversation with him. I had to leave. And then I got my thoughts together and went back after, said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You know, I grew up watching you on TV, and he was so kind to me. And he still is an incredible person, very kind, very humble. And I still get a little bit giggly. Not giggly, just sort of like, and I try really hard. And yeah, I don't want to lose that, because that's something nice to have.
Oh, look, Tanni, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I'm sorry we're out of time. Thank you so much for your insights, not only in your amazing sports career, but obviously what you're doing now, important work in the House of Lords. Thank you for joining us in the Brilliant Minds Bunker. And yeah, good luck with the rest of lockdown.
Thank you.